As you're aware, this is sort of a webinar about the Power Apps Health Check. Is your app production ready? Now, realistically, we should probably call this the Power Platform Health Check, and is your solution production ready? And we'll get into why I'm talking about that in a moment, but it's not just about a specific app, whether that be a Canvas app, a model-driven app. It's not whether that's production ready, it's whether the whole solution and your process is production ready. So are the Power Automates ready to go? Do you have a proper application lifecycle management process in place? We're going to talk about all of that today. So before we get into the weeds of things, what I will do is give a brief introduction about me. So you can see my little head there down in the bottom left-hand corner. I think I was severely hungover in that picture, so not looking my best, but I'm the Power Platform lead here at Valto. I've been working here now for a little over 3 years, about 3.5 years potentially, and I've been in the Microsoft 365 space now for over 7 years. So I'm 27 at the moment, and I've been doing this ever since before I was sort of 20 years old. So I actually joined a Microsoft 365 consultancy in my placement year at university, and whether you say fortunately or unfortunately, I've kind of stuck within the space ever since. So I've been around doing SharePoint on-premise 2013 stuff, SharePoint designer workflows and things like that, and I've been here since the beginning of the Power Platform. So hopefully I kind of know what I'm talking about. Fingers crossed anyway. So a little bit more about me. I love sports, football, boxing, running, hiking, you name it. If you're following us on socials, you might have just seen that we've just done the Welsh 3000. So I've still got a little bit of a fatigue from that. So hopefully I won't fall asleep whilst presenting this to you guys. But anyway, the agenda, as you may have already seen from the Eventbrite link, we're going to be looking at why a Power Apps Health Check matters, assessing performance and scalability, security and compliance best practices, and optimizing your Power Apps or Power Platform strategy. And then at the end, as I mentioned, we'll do a bit of a live Q&A. As I said, fingers crossed, you're all going to provide me with a bunch of questions and things, so that'll be great. But before we get started, when I'm saying sort of, as I mentioned at the start, this is more tailored towards Power Platform as opposed to just Power Apps. Everyone's implementation of the Power Platform is completely different. Everyone has a different set of processes that they're using within the Power Platform. They might have a Power Pages website with a model-driven application as the back end. They might have a Canvas application that's built on top of SharePoint. They might just have a couple of Power Automate processes that is working on top of Dataverse. And all of those different processes are all achieving different things, really. So there's no real one-size-fits-all solution for sort of performing a health check. However, there are a lot of different common things that I see, or common pitfalls that I see, that people tend to kind of fall down. So we're going to sort of stay a little bit high level, but we're hopefully going to sort of give you enough where you can sort of get the ball rolling and do a little bit more of a deep dive yourself, or either that or sort of get Valto involved to give you a bit of assistance. So why does a health check matter? So common scenarios that I see when people are coming to us is that potentially an internal developer has left, sometimes not leaving any documentation, which seems to be a bit of a recurring theme. The company that you work for may have parted ways with a third party who originally developed the application. The internal developer no longer has the skill set or the time to continue on building that application or that set of applications. So the workshops are primarily focused on an existing application or set of applications. And a lot of the time they've been developed by what we call citizen developers. What you'll notice is that Microsoft's wording around citizen developers has changed a lot. So originally it was like, it's really easy to get going, everything, well, you can just set it up in 5 minutes and you're done. I think what a lot of people have found is it's very easy to get going, but pretty hard to actually get right. So Microsoft has kind of retracted their statements around citizen developers, and they've now put the focus more on actual developers with sort of citizen developer help. So there's definitely areas in which sort of citizen developers can produce applications within the Power Platform. And I've even worked alongside clients who have people who have never had any programming or IT experience before, and they've built a really nice and great application. But they do, as I mentioned earlier, kind of fall into a common set of pitfalls. So why else does the health check matter? So a lot of people have security as an afterthought. So going back to the point of it's very easy to get going, a lot of people don't even consider the security aspects and sort of if it's going to be able to scale. Is the Power Platform or the specific tool within the Power Platform even the right tool for the job? And once they've got going, can they iterate on top of that? If something were to happen, could they then spin up a new environment very quickly and get going again? Can they redeploy this to multiple locations or multiple business units? I think a lot of the time people are doing development and that's it. They've got the live solution, they've got the live environment, and that's all they've got. They've got no way to recover things or no way to sort of efficiently build on top of what they've got. Already talking too much. I'm just going to have a sip of water if that's okay. So a lot of the common issues or pitfalls that I see people go down, especially sort of citizen developers, is they have no ALM in place. So what do I mean by ALM? So what it stands for is Application Lifecycle Management. And essentially, in its most basic form, there's a bunch of different iterations and ways that means that you can implement ALM, but in its most basic form, what you want is a development, a test, and a live environment. And what that allows you to do is build an MVP of a product, for example, have it tested in your test area, move to your production area, and then further iterations of new features, bug fixes, etc. can be going on in parallel or in tandem with that production app because they're actually happening in the development and the test environment. So it's far more efficient to have multiple areas set up, and you then are not running the risk of slamming changes onto live and things like that. And hand in hand with that, a lot of the time people aren't utilizing solutions, so they're doing all of the development in the default environment, and they're just creating Power Automate, they're creating Canvas applications, they're doing whatever, and they're all kind of they're everywhere. They're not kind of contained in one solution or the multiple solutions. Now, again, like with anything, you can get as complicated as you want to be with sort of solutions and ALM. You might want to have a solution per business unit, a solution per technology, so a solution for all your Power Automates, a solution for your Canvas apps, a solution for your environment variables. But again, for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to try and keep things as simple as possible. So we'll keep to one solution which contains all of our artifacts, and we're going to stick to a development, test, and live environment. So following on from that, a lot of the time, because people don't have this ALM set up, code is being pushed directly into the live area. So any bug fixes and changes, new features, whatever that might be, they're being put directly into the place where everyone's using the application. Now, this causes potential huge risks, especially if a lot of the business is using the application, because if someone new comes along and they apply a new change, bug fix, whatever that might be, then you're running the risk of adding bugs into the production environment and potentially sort of taking a whole business unit out for an entire day if a company's relying on that specific solution. Another common issue that I find is that people are simply using the Power Platform as a mechanism to replicate their on-premise or existing clunky systems and just digitize them. And digitizing them isn't always great. It might seem shiny, it might seem great, it might seem all of this stuff, but if you put rubbish in, you're going to get rubbish out, essentially. People are just copying and pasting their process, and it's still just as rubbish in the cloud, if not worse, because they don't necessarily understand what they're doing, than it was when they were just filling out paper forms and things. A lot of the time, people are building on top of things such as SharePoint, which is completely fine in certain instances. but they're then hitting SharePoint limitations. They're hitting sort of the 5,000 item threshold. They're kind of hitting delegation issues. Not all of the data is loading correctly, performance issues, etc. People are using preview features and controls in their applications and pushing those things into production. This is kind of a big no-no. I've experienced this myself, where things just do not function as they're intended to, sometimes in preview controls. And the purpose of a preview control, the meaning of it, is that it's still being developed, it's still being worked on, it's by no means sort of production ready. So is your app production ready? I can immediately probably say no if you're using preview controls. Again, trying to whittle through these a little bit quicker. So error handling, people are rubbish at this. They'll tend to just allow things to fail. They won't have the necessarily logging in place to be able to recover from something or rerun something if it was failing. And again, I mentioned security. There's different levels to security. So is your environment locked down appropriately? Has it got an IP firewall in place? Do you have your DLP policies in place? Is it locked down to a specific security group? And then getting more granular than that, security roles within the Power Platform itself. This is a whole sort of different animal, a different beast than just sort of the likes of SharePoint, for example. So a lot of what I see is people don't quite understand the security roles, so they might just be applying system administrator because that kind of gives them access to everything. But as we know, you probably don't want to be giving people all of that level of privilege, because they're just going to go through and mess things up essentially. So what do I look for when I'm assessing performance and scalability? So again, I'm going to hammer this home on pretty much nearly every single slide, because a lot more often than not, I'd probably say as far as 90% of people that I go into these reviews with don't have a proper application lifecycle management process in place. So we've already touched on dev, test and live, and a little bit on solutions, but you also want to be looking at what kind of solutions are you deploying to these various environments. So you've got this concept of managed and unmanaged solutions. So unmanaged is essentially, you can kind of think of it, it's a bit of an abstraction, but as your uncompiled code. So it's just your source code, and that's where you're tinkering around and making changes sort of only in the development environment. Once you're happy with that set of changes that you've made, you package things up into what's called a managed solution, and that's what you're going to be deploying to test and live. It's got much tighter version control. You can't edit the components within it. You can only make changes on top of as what's called managed layers. And then what that prevents is someone going in and making a quick hot fix on live, for example, and then having a feature that exists on the live environment that doesn't actually exist in the development environment. Then what might happen there is someone might push your changes from development into test and live and overwrite those changes and sort of re-implement a bug. So I'm hoping that kind of makes sense. I'm really going to hammer that home for you guys. So big O notation. Some of you may be aware of what this is if you've sort of delved into the computer science world, but essentially all it is a mathematical notation to describe the complexity of your algorithms. So I'm looking at your code, whether it be in your Canvas app, your web resources for model-driven applications, or your Power Automate processes. Are you doing things in the most efficient way? Do you have 4 nested for each or loops that are going on that's running over the entire data set every single time and taking hours to run? Could you be filtering that data at the source and then only potentially doing 1 for each as opposed to those nested 4 that I was mentioning? Again, real high level examples, but these are the kind of things that we look for in order to sort of make sure that your app is performing correctly and it's going to be scalable. So what about your data? So again, the 2 most common data sources that I see are obviously Dataverse and SharePoint. We do often see things like SQL and, God forbid, Excel, but is your data structured in a way that makes sense? Is the data normalized? Do you have a set of repeated data throughout your application? Is your data going to continuously grow exponentially? So, for example, do you have an expenses application that or a leave request application that for each leave request, for some reason, it enters all 5 days of the week. So you already know that for each leave request, there's going to be 5 items within it, something like that. You want to make sure that you're reviewing that and you're limiting the amount that your data is going to be growing. And as an aside to that, you also want to limit the amount of data that your application is ever handling at any one time. For example, within a Canvas application, you don't want to be loading all of that data in and then slicing and dicing, filtering the data within the Canvas application. You might want to be filtering the data at source, so retrieving that data via the API pre-filtered for you, so you're not iterating over sort of hundreds or thousands of rows. And another thing which I think is quite often overlooked when assessing performance and scalability is, can this be picked up by a new team member? We talk about scalability as just sort of the number of users that are using the app, but inherently, when your app gets bigger and more people are using the application, you're going to need a bigger support team. You're going to need more people that understand the app inside and out, so that they can implement bug fixes and implement new features. And if it's not easy to make those changes, or it's not easy to understand, then your app inherently is not scalable. So these are all things that I'll be looking out for, not limited to these factors either. And I've got to say, as I'll mention on the sort of security and compliance best practices, not every single thing that I mention here needs to be implemented to the nth degree. A lot of people focus and they worry about having an enterprise grade application for their business of 2 people that doesn't even need to be locked down. It might just be a basic form collecting data, and then all of a sudden they've implemented 4,000 security roles, DLPs and things like that, which is great if you've got an enterprise scale application dealing with sort of sensitive information and data. But if you've just got a really basic app where there's 2 users using it and it's writing to a SharePoint list where all of the information is going to be shared at the company meeting at the end of the week anyway, do you need to invest your time and effort into overcomplicating your app when you don't necessarily need to? So often a bit of a tangent there, but it's just an aside note. So security and compliance and best practice. So as I mentioned earlier, you want to be making sure that you're going for a security first approach. And as I've just said, you might not even need security, but it's one of the first things that you should be thinking about. Does the HR team need access to the records, or does it just need to be locked down to the finance team, for example? You don't just want to be building your application and then thinking about security as an afterthought, because trust me, it gets really, really messy. It's definitely something that we can assist with and give you pointers with, but it's something that you want to sort of implement from the get-go. So data loss prevention policies, as I've been mentioning before, they're in their sort of basic implementation. They can allow you to limit the connections that sort of end users and developers are making within their applications. You might not want sort of certain business units to be able to connect to Dataverse, for example, whatever that might be. Data loss prevention policies allow you to limit the connections that are made on a per user basis or a per group basis, or whatever that might be. The new Power Platform Admin Center, it's recently been released, and it gives you a whole set of recommendations that you can be applying at both the environment and the tenant level to keep your solution secure and compliant. So we're going to have a look at a screenshot in just a moment, and I'll walk through a couple of things there. Source control, again, kind of tangentially related to security and compliance, but you want to make sure that you're keeping regular backups of everything that you're doing. Not only are you having backups in your development environment, but you're keeping a backup of the managed and unmanaged solution in a separate source control, such as Azure DevOps or GitHub, ensuring that if something were to go drastically wrong, for example, Dave's an idiot and he's implemented a bug in version 1.1 where it boots them out of the system every time, you quickly want to be able to back up to version 1.1, for example, where that bug isn't present. And there's a bunch of different things that you can do in regard to source control. Obviously, you can set up pipelines, you can set up direct Git integration, or you can just do a manual approach and export the solutions as is. So again, there's no one size fits all, but these are the kind of things that we're looking at, especially when I'm doing a review of people's current setup. So locking down environments to specific security groups, or only allowing certain people access to this environment. A lot of the time, I'll see that people might go part of the way in implementing an ALM approach, but then all of a sudden, all the users, for whatever reason, have access to the development environment. They're then getting confused as to which is the development environment and which is the test environment, and it's just a whole heap of chaos. Even worse than that is an application might be developed specifically for the finance team, but again, because you haven't locked down that specific environment, then people that aren't in the finance team are able to access it. Even more so, at a step above this, is the fact that there's this new feature that removes the ability for guests to have access to an environment. So if you've got users that are able to share pieces of data or share links to the application, they might be able to provide guest access to specific guests within your tenancy. More often than not, this isn't something that you're wanting, so it's just a quick setting to turn off. And then sort of whittling through this is the principle of least privilege. So some of you may or may not have heard of this, but the principle of least privilege essentially does what it says on the tin, is that you're only assigning people the minimum set of permissions that we need. So if we go back a couple of slides, and I mentioned about people being assigned the system administrator role, then you want to make sure that that person who you're assigning that security role to only has access to the specific table or the specific app that they should do. And you should operate that sort of across the board between development, test and live environments, and anywhere else within your Microsoft 365 tenancy for that matter, actually. So you don't want every user within the production environment to have environment maker or system customizer or whatever you might have assigned to them just because it gets them going. You want to invest a little bit of time into defining exactly what the security roles are up front, and then making sure that those security settings are applied throughout the application and the set of applications. Okay, so next couple of slides, I apologize because I'd love to do a demonstration, but demoing me reviewing an application isn't necessarily feasible. So I've provided a bit of screenshots, so you're not just getting bored of me talking and looking at these slides of all the pretty people that work at Valto. So this is a demo tenant that I'd set up literally the other day. If we've got a bit of time at the end, I might try and share my screen and sort of walk through the new Power Platform Admin Center. But quite usefully, whenever you set up a new environment, they're just providing them without all the security settings out of the box, because why would they, right? So assigning, when you're creating a new environment, you can see that I think I've just got the default environment and a development environment on this tenancy. And you can see that I've got a low security score out of the box. And this is just a report that you get kind of for free within the Power Platform Admin Center. You can then also see at the bottom a set of recommendations that you can apply on a per environment basis. Now, these are really useful because some of them are kind of just a one click and done. So you might just click on it. It says apply this setting. And then you get sort of a boost to your security score. And obviously what you're looking for is to be in the green. Other ones of these you need to be careful with. So I think, for example, IP firewalls for environments might be actually a premium feature. So you need to set up what's called managed environments. And I can talk you through the relevant licensing and how to set these up, etc. Offline if this is something that you're interested in. But assigning or setting up these security settings, some of them incur additional licensing fees, and there's also ones that aren't necessarily presented as recommendations off the bat. So there's sort of like several hundred or thousand Power Platform specific settings that you can go into and review. And there's also those other settings on the left-hand navigation that you can see, sort of data and privacy, identity and access, compliance, etc. And it will go through each of those and give you the relevant settings and details about them. So that's that on the security side of things. One thing that I wanted to sort of hit home as well, and I think I've already spoken about it, is this is all well and good, but you want to also make a balance of, is this going to start soaking up all of your development time? Are you overcomplicating the security setup? Are you overcomplicating the performance of your application, trying to refine your application, making sure it's all enterprise grade if you're only using it for 2 people? Now, one thing I'll touch on in just a moment is what's called the Power Platform Well Architected, which is essentially a set of framework, or it is a framework provided by Microsoft, which helps you align to basically all of the slides that I've mentioned here. So not only would companies like us, Balto, be able to help you implement this kind of thing, but there's a whole bunch of free resources online that you can use to at least get you underway. One thing I will mention about those is that a lot of them is it's focused on developing an app from the ground up, whereas a lot of what I'm seeing, as I mentioned at the start of this presentation, is people are coming to us with a pre-built application. They've already built the app and it might not be aligned to best practice, but what are the steps that you can take, that sort of the 5 quick wins, as it were, that you can do to make sure that your app is production ready? And I'll get onto that in just a moment. So again, another amazing screenshot, quite highly redacted here, is what you might see from a source control perspective. So a solution isn't always necessarily just the artifacts that are involved within the Power Platform. You might have certain scripts that are involved in configuring artifacts within Azure or SharePoint, whatever that might be. So you can see here that within Azure DevOps, I've got a folder which separates each of the concerns. So I've got web resources in one, I've got PowerShell in another, I've got custom connectors in another here, and I've got the solutions there. And what this allows us to do, you can see that's in the initial build branch, is quickly tag and refer back to any previous changes that we may have made. If say we've implemented a bug in version 1.2, then we can quickly revert back to 1.1. This also allows us to adhere to coding standards. So for example, if we're looking at the web resources folder, that's written in JavaScript. We want to make sure that we're aligning to our internal sort of coding standards, and it's much easier to do that via source control and review things through pull requests, for example. So now we're going to get on to optimizing your Power Apps or your Power Platform strategy. So you can see down there, I'm sort of touching on the Power Platform Well Architected section as well. So importance of planning. So in the very first, or one of the very first slides, I mentioned how it's easy to get going and hard to get right. Now, there's a real tendency to just kind of dive straight into the code, especially with low code, because it's so easy to get started and make real headway in just like a couple of days. But what is really, really key is making sure that you're defining a set of achievable requirements right from the get-go. This really dramatically improves your success rate when trying to develop an application or a suite of applications. You want to make sure you're defining clear user stories up front, because otherwise you're going to end up with one behemoth application that does 1,000,001 different things because it's been passed through 7 different generations of developer, and the whole point of it's completely lost now. What might have been a better approach is to create one solution that does provide sort of 1 or 2 user stories or requirements, and another solution or set of applications that achieves another set of things. Again, every use case is completely different between companies, so I'm trying to keep this as high level as possible. Another real key thing that I again mentioned quite early on is optimizing your process. As I said, rubbish in is rubbish out. A lot of the time, people just simply want to digitize their age-old process, which often results in sort of poor outcomes. So if your current process requires the head of HR to do 6 cartwheels on every third Thursday of the month as the sun rises, then it's unlikely that that same process is going to translate well to the digital world. You need to really have a look at that process and see, okay, is there anything that can be cut out? Does the HR lady really need to do 6 cartwheels out on the sunrise? Can you completely simplify that process and make sure that it's being it would translate well to the digital world? Minimal touch points without having to go through 65 different approval processes. Keeping things simple often leads to the best results, and that often means that you just need to take a step back and redefine the existing process in the first place. And that might sound a little bit boring, but more often than not, people get themselves in a bit of a pickle when they're trying to sort of keep up with the trend and migrate onto the digital world and the digital platform, when their existing process might be rubbish. And you also got to take a step back and think, okay, well, my process is actually 2 stages, and I pass a piece of paper over to the person who sits 2 yards to the left of me. Do I really need a 3-stage approval process to do that? So again, it's thinking about, does that actually need to be digitized? And if it does need to be digitized, how can we first simplify and improve it before doing that? So as I mentioned in the previous slide, Power Platform well architected. It's a great set of resources, which I believe has, we'll check in a moment actually, because we're doing pretty well for time, which has a number of pillars, which are kind of aligned pretty much to the slides as I mentioned, which guide you through how to develop an application that will itself be production ready. Now, when I say guide you through, there is an awful lot of information in those guides. It's going to take someone sort of weeks, if not months, to consume it, probably a little bit more to understand it, and then even more to implement it. If you're already an IT administrator or someone in the IT space, it's a really set of useful tools, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend as a novice just to go through and read it and think that you're going to be building the best application you've ever seen, because it's very unlikely. So that's familiarizing yourself with Power Platform well architected. I've just scrolled and ruined all the slides, sorry guys. So again, source control. This is a key thing in your strategy. You want to make sure that source control is at the heart of everything you do alongside security. And there's one thing that I've missed off of here, and that is deployment of the Center of Excellence. So if you're not aware of what that is, again, please reach out to us and we can assist you with that. But it's a set of tools that have been provided by Microsoft, which gives you a more granular view of everything that's being developed onto your Power Platform environment. So this allows you, from a governance perspective, to monitor everything that's going on. You might find that for some reason, everyone is able to build apps in sort of a development environment, and you might not want that to happen. The Power Platform, the Power App Center of Excellence allows you to monitor and review that, apply relevant settings, and sort of get a bit of a deep dive into what's going on within your setup. So that's a point that I missed off there. That's generally one of the first things that I tend to recommend, especially if you're using the Power Platform in anger. That being said, it might be a bit overkill if you've literally just got one application. Again, everything is kind of, it depends on your exact implementation. So that leads me now to quick wins. So what quick wins can you implement in order to make sure that your application is going to be production ready? It might not need to be at enterprise grade. I think there's just a set of key things that you need to implement, and you probably can't go wrong. And I think that they're pretty simple, but it feels like a lot of people fall into the same pitfalls. So I'm missing one off here as well. So well done, Dave. So the first one would be ensuring that if you've got an existing set of applications and you don't have ALM set up, ALM is probably the #1 priority that you want to focus on before implementing any bug fixes or changes. If you can set up a proper ALM process, you can mess about with things in dev, spin up new dev environments, get new features and bug fixes rolled out to test, and things are just far more scalable, far more efficient, and you'll generally find that you get a lot better user adoption because you've got bug fixes are actually being made rather than bug fixes are being made and then further bugs are implemented. Second of all, and this is kind of a tricky one if you're already down the rabbit hole of making the world's biggest app that Sharon's doing 6 cartwheels on a Thursday or whatever it was that I said. But keep it simple, stupid. That principle, you want to make sure that that comes in everything that you do. I really hit home on simplifying your process when you're trying to transfer it to the digital world. And I really think that alongside ALM is going to save your bacon more often than not. If you keep things as simple as possible, then things are simple to fix, things are simple to understand, and things are simple to roll back. Okay. Document everything. So before you get underway with your app, or if you've already got an existing app, document everything that you know. What happens if poor Dave gets hit by a bus the next day, or goes on a 8-week holiday to the, I don't know, I wish to the Maldives or something like that, and poor little Timmy needs to pick something up and they need to implement a bug fix, and you haven't abided by your KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, and everything's confusing as hell for poor Timmy, and it's going to take ages for them to fix it. Document as much as you can. Get together a low-level design documentation, which is something that we at Valto produce with every single one of our projects, which outlines for each business requirement and user story, how are we going to implement this, what technology is used, and we provide a load of diagrams, so user stories, sequence diagrams, process diagrams, etc. Follow the guidance in the admin center. It's literally giving you exactly what you need to make sure that you've got a secure environment. Obviously, don't just take everything that is mentioned within there sort of verbatim. There might be a reason for you not needing to IP restrict your environment, because you might be a business that has people all across the globe, for example. So don't just implement it for the sake of saying, oh, my secure score is going to increase by 1%. Take it with a pinch of salt and review exactly what those recommendations are and see if it fits your business. Finally, separation of concerns, which goes back again, tying it into keeping things simple, is making sure that you haven't just got one behemoth application or processes that is doing everything within your business. See if you can break things out into smaller applications or smaller chunks. Use, for example, in Power Automate, child flows, or I believe it's still in preview at the moment, but what's coming out is user-defined functions in Canvas applications, and low-code plugins, for example. What these allow you to do is create repeatable pieces of code or automations that almost like fail safes. If they fail, you know that it's that little thing that's failed and you can rerun it. Whereas if it's embedded in one app and then you need it repeated in another app or whatever it is, it just comes a right pain in the backside to sort of replicate what you've got, especially if you're looking to become as scalable as possible. Separate your order of concerns and things will be a lot more achievable, especially when you're looking to scale up. So I've got a few more slides here, but I'm looking at the time and I think we are looking okay for time. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly, drag you guys across here and have a quick look at what the admin center is looking like from an end user perspective. So you can see here, this is the same screenshot that I had previously. But if you go into these things here, it will take you exactly directly to where you need. For example, setting up a new data loss prevention policy. If I went into here, let's see if there's an easier one. So setting up IP whitelist. Because I've just spun up this environment, I don't think it's properly loaded for me at the moment. Turn on tenant auditing. So again, these are all just things that you can quickly enable. But of course, my environments aren't loading for the purpose of the demonstration. But then there's also the breakdown of each of the different settings that you've got along the side here. So you can set up sort of all kinds of technical things, such as your virtual network policies, etc. You've got a few things that are in preview, so disabling guest access on specific environments, which I think is really useful and key. Reviewing who's got Who's got administrator privileges? I don't know how we've got -1 users with the Power Platform admin role, but again, just wanted to show you this because it's kind of a shiny new thing, and it gives you a whole host of reports and features that you may not be used to seeing. What I can do is I'll see if I can pop it in the chat, but again, a bunch of useful information around managed environments, the associated licensing that is incurred with those, because some of these settings that I was referring to under the action settings require you to have the managed environment set up. So it's just something to be aware of. Power Platform well architected, like I was speaking about before. It's got these what's that, five pillars. So reliability, security, operational excellence, performance efficiency, and experience optimization. If you read through all of this documentation, you're in a great stead to get on with building an application. It's even got an assessment tool which essentially guides you through a set of questions, pardon me, to ask yourself in regard to are you following the right design principle? Are you using the right technology within the Power Platform? And then there's also some documentation here. Microsoft Learn is great for all of this in regard to why you shouldn't be using the default environment. It's actually suggesting here that you should, but where you should be using shared or dedicated environments for specific applications, depending on the number of users, the nature of the data, the impact to the business, and a few other things. So I can pop all of these relevant links in the chat. And a quick, real boring demo is just for those who may not be aware of what things are, like managed solutions and things like that. When you go to make.powerapps.com, you can see your list of environments here along the top right hand corner. So if I've set up a Contoso development, that's there. We'd also have a development test and live. Within that, you can then see all of the managed and unmanaged solutions. So if I haven't got the greatest of examples here, but the default solution here, this is probably going to take an eternity to load because I'm presenting. Essentially, you can go into this and then you can actually make amends to something within there. So you can see that you've got the edit button, not grayed out, because I'm in a unmanaged solution. Whereas if I went to a managed solution, for example, these are all sort of ones that are provided by Microsoft anyway, out of the box. So if I just went into Power Apps Checker Base, wait for this to load. Of course, there's nothing in it. That's really useful. AI sample data. So you can see within here, if you see this banner, it would say you cannot directly edit items within an unmanaged or a managed solution. You can see the edit button there, but when you press it, you'll be presented with an error. So that's that. So let's get back to the slideshow. So quick wins. So final piece of the puzzle, we've got a little bit of self-promotion. Obviously, everything that I've spoken about today is quite high level. At Valto, we offer a Power Apps or a Power Platform health check. We'd be speaking to someone like myself. We'd have a workshop where you provide a demonstration or a solution overview of what you've got, any pain points that you've got, your current approach to working within the Power Platform. We'll then guide you through a lot more detail around best practice, like we've mentioned today, ALM, security, data structures, licensing, how is it licensed, etc. And they can go one of a number of ways. Sometimes people want us to onboard their application or solutions into support. Other people just want a set of pointers based off a couple of bugs they're having, and other people just want to see if they're aligning to best practice and maybe learn something new. So that's pretty much everything in regard to a Power Apps health check. Please reach out to us. We basically provide a detailed report with all of the security settings that you need to have applied, any set of recommendations, and as I've mentioned here, kind of a proposed transition plan. So if we look at that now, let's go to the Q&A. I'm really excited, guys. Have you guys provided me with a question at all. Let's have a quick look. I can tab out. There we go. Okay. So Q&A. Sure. So Sean has asked, let me stop sharing my screen. And in fact, let me get that back up over here just so we can see where we're at. So Sean has asked, how can we set up development and test areas and move the app between them? So I can give a real high level brief demonstration of how something like this might happen. So you can see here that I've got my default and my development environment. As an administrative user, I can select the cog in the top right hand corner, allow this to load. I believe because this is a demo environment, it's not going to allow me to create a new environment, but you can see here in the environment section, I've got the option to create a new environment, and I've already created that development one. And then there's a few things that you can do. You can select a security group and all of that nonsense, but you've got the types of environments that you've got. So you might want to set up a developer one for your dev or a sandbox one for your dev, and then you probably want a sandbox for your test and production for your production. Once you've set that up, you'll then have the relevant environments that you want to move things between. And as I mentioned at the start, there's a number of different ways that you can move things between environments, whether that be pipelines or just the manual approach. But if we just took a manual approach and we created a new solution, Dave's solution, where am I in the development environment right now? Let's go to the default environment. Although we shouldn't be creating stuff in here, this is just a demo environment. Dave's solution. I'm going to use the default publisher. This is all stuff that I'd walk you through on the health check, for example. So think of the solution as your folder of artifacts that contains everything. So once this loads, you can create stuff directly within here, or if you've already got an existing set of applications or automations, you can add those to the solution. So add them to the folder. But because I don't have anything right now, let's just quickly set up a quick Power Automate. If that loads, nothing better than a live demo, right, guys? So skip this. I'm just going to call this Dave. I'm going to give this a button as the trigger. And I'm going to set a compose action and just say Dave is cool, like that. Let's save this app now. Give this a second to save. And while that's loading, I can see another question from Steve. So are you aware of any recognized or recommended documented standards for Canvas Power Apps, things like naming variables, labels, drop downs, to help provide consistency between apps and between developers? And yes, Steve, there is actually a set of guidance. I forget if it's provided by Microsoft themselves or whether it's from a Microsoft MVP, but there's a whole set of documentation which I can link you directly in this chat, or if not, if the chat for whatever closes, please reach out to me at dave@valto.co.uk and I will be able to provide you with a link to the PDF. But essentially, all it is would be that if you're creating a label, for example, the naming convention for that would be LBL _ whatever the label is, whether that's like first name, for example. Same thing for a combo box. You might have CMB _ names as your combo box, whatever that might be for you guys. So yeah, there is a set of standardized sort of naming conventions for controls. Same thing for Power Automates and everything like that within the Power Platform. It's a really useful tool for if you've got multiple developers working on something. It makes the code more consistent and it makes it far more readable. So what we can see that I'm doing now is I've created this really basic cloud flow. I'm now publishing the customizations. This takes a couple of minutes sometimes, especially if you're in sort of a demo tenant like me. So hopefully this will go along. Do we have any standards that Valto use that are shareable? Yeah, of course. So again, very similar to the naming conventions that I was just referring to. We also align ourselves to the Power Platform well architected, and there's also, depending on sort of what kind of granularity you want to get to, there's all kinds of sort of development standards that we align ourselves to, sort of in terms of like agile development, actual pro code development. So again, I believe that was from yourself, Steve. Please reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to provide you with any relevant documentation. So you can see here now that, sorry, that took a little bit of time. We've got Dave's solution, which contains my one flow. What we want to then do is we create an export of that solution. Now, again, we can do this with pipelines, but we're going to do this manually. You've got the version of it. You can choose whether you want to export this as a managed or unmanaged solution. Remember, a managed solution, you can't edit anything within it. An unmanaged version, you can edit things. So let's just go with a managed one for now. You select export. I understand that this is a bit of a weird example because we're moving from development to default to development. This again will kind of wear away in the background and produce a download for us in just a second. Anonymous question: with the security score, what is deemed a good score? What did you find is the average? Now, per my understanding, the security score for the Power Platform is quite a new development. So in terms of an average across what I've seen from people, it's generally pretty low, to be fair. But that being said, there's certainly some security settings that probably should be applied. For example, locking down your environment to a specific security group, just as a starter for 10. And that will then bump the score. I think it gives you how much it's going to bump the score by, whether that be 1 or 10%, for example. And then you're looking for at least to be in the upper orange to the green is what I'd say. But as I mentioned previously, there are a fair amount of those security settings that might only be pertinent to if you're using an enterprise grade solution where only the finance team need to edit something. You need to take it, you need to sort of put your solution architect hat on and think, okay, fair enough, we probably need to lock down the environment for guest access, but everyone in the business needs access to this data, so we probably don't need to apply 4 million security settings and things like that. So going back to the screen that I've got here, I've created that solution, version 1.0.0.0. I'm downloading it. What this will give me is a zip package, and as I said, it's always best practice to download a version of the managed and unmanaged solution, such that you can upload that to your source control, and you can do that automatically via pipelines and Git integration, but we're just doing this manually, as I've mentioned. But for the purpose of the demonstration, I've just downloaded a managed version. I'm then going to switch over to my new development environment, but let's pretend this is the production. Again, completely done this backwards. But if we import the solution, you browse, you go to your downloads. Luckily, I've got no dodgy downloads in there, guys. Select the solution, select next. It will give you a bunch of information, which generally 9 times out of 10 you can keep as the standard for most of these things. Because I don't have anything such as connection references, because my Power Automate isn't connecting to Dataverse or SharePoint, and because all I'm doing is logging Dave's call into the console, I haven't got anything that requires an environment variable. But generally, on that last step before it said import, that's when it would ask me to enter in all of the relevant environment variables, and those are useful for things such as SharePoint URLs, Microsoft 365 group GUIDs, emails that might change between development, test and live, for example. At that stage, that would then allow you to alter those between environments and configure them. And then again, this will just take a couple of minutes to import in the background. And then what you'll see is that is essentially a very, very whistle-stop tour and basic implementation of ALM. We've taken out an application from the default environment. We've put it into the solution. we've packaged up that solution and we're now moving it to the relevant environment. And the reason why I've only downloaded a managed solution is I want to show you exactly what I mean when it says that you can't sort of make relevant changes. So as an administrative user, I can go into my Dave solution here. So you can see now that it's under managed in my development environment. I go into here, obviously bit of a noddy example because we've only got the one Cloudflow in here. Apologies that everything's being slow. I'm not sure what's going on. But in here, you can see that the edit button is grayed out. I can get some details, but I can't edit this app. Now, can't edit, it's a bit of a lie because I can go into here, again, as a bit of an administrative user. Generally, your end users aren't going to be able to see this, but if I wanted to, I could go into the app, make a change. Dave is cool, but he smells a bit, something like that. And then I can, but you see that I've got this banner here. So I've got, it will create an unmanaged layer. And what we see when I save this, what I see quite a lot of the time when people have actually given ALM a stab is, as opposed to abiding by their process and making changes in develop, pushing into test, then pushing into live, they've gone, I can't be bothered to do that, or I don't know what to do, and I'm just going to smash the change straight onto live. And what you'll now see is, if I go on to see solution layers, you can see that in the environment, I've got the base deployment that I've got, and I've got an unmanaged layer. And what you want to avoid at all costs is having unmanaged layers on your managed version of your solution, because what then happens if I then went to implement a new feature, pushing it from develop to test to live, I won't see those feature changes because I've got this unmanaged layer. The only time I could ever tell you where an unmanaged layer would even be not even acceptable, but like it might be okay, is if there's a massive bug in live that needs a hot fix. You can jump on, you can make that fix, but then always go back into your develop area, make the same change that you've made, push it into test and push it into live. Now, that is like a real big no-no, and you never want to be doing that. However, I want to keep I'm going to be honest and say that does sometimes happen in edge case scenarios, but I'm hoping that wasn't too rushed, and that was kind of a brief overview of how you can add a set of apps or automations into a solution. You can export that solution and then import it into a new environment. Obviously, the demonstration that I just gave is a little bit naff because ideally you'd be doing your development, you'd then be pushing into test and live. But I've just given a brief example of how I might move from the default environment, where we don't want to be making any code changes, into a development environment, albeit I've slammed in a managed solution and I'd want to be doing an unmanaged one where I could make changes more freely. But yeah, I can see that this, well, unless it's lying to me and unless all 13 attendees that it's saying is my mum, does anyone have any more questions that they want to ask before I drop off? Because I know that we're at the end of the time right now. I'll give everyone 10 seconds or so to ask a quick question in the chat. I'm assuming the attendees have dropped down and there's not that many people in it now. Okay, well, doesn't look like there's any further questions, but if there is, please contact hello@valto.co.uk or reach out to myself. If I ignore you or pass you on to someone else, I'm not being rude, I'm just extremely busy, but I will do my best. If Steve, for example, wanted to reach out regarding some of those sort of frameworks or best practices to align to, more than happy to send an email with some details about that. But yeah, for now, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope that you found some value out of it, and I hope I didn't sort of rush or just absolutely waffle to you guys. And yeah, appreciate it. I will chat to you all. Well, we haven't really chatted, but I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.